Now, you are welcome to the latest in our series of GAA roadshows in association with Supervalu, calling on the GAA fans across the country to support where you're from. You can check out youtube.com/Supervalu Ireland for more information. This is our preview section. We've already spoken to Pat Short and Declan Brown in Tipperary. They're very excited. We've had the dubs on, Pillar Caffrey and Jason Sherlock, and now it's time to preview the weekend's action. So to do that, from a Cavan perspective, 23 years ago, Martin McHugh was the man at the helm when all hell broke loose and Cavan won Ulster for the first time since 1969. Martin McHugh, you're very welcome. How you doing?
Thanks, Joe. How are you?
I'm great. 23 years goes by quick.
Yeah, it's hard to believe it. I'd be hoped that I was on here tonight talking about Donegal playing Dublin, but that's the way it goes. But we'll not begrudge Cavan. But it was. They're a fabulous football county. I know all about them. I know people might say that the greatest GAA county in Ireland is Kerry with tradition and everything else. I would always say Cavan, because there's no other sport played really in Cavan, only Gaelic football, and they're very, very big into it. And if there were crowds in Croke Park this weekend, you were talking about at least 50,000 Cavan people from all over the world coming to it. So that maybe is a wee bit of a disappointment. But on the other hand, it might help the players and the team in that, to keep the pressure off.
Well, if you want proof of their GAA credentials, look no further than YouTube. Kieran and I both went on today to remind ourselves of that 97 Ulster final when Derry were beaten by a point by Cavan. And Kieran, I think the highlight is the Martin McHugh full-time interview on the pitch.
Yeah, it's actually, there'll be dangerous hazard warnings around it now for both interviewer and interviewee. Martin, how did you get out of there alive? Because Marty Morrissey came back about 4 minutes later and it sounded like you just got out of the scrum.
Listen, that Cavan, that's exactly what I meant to them and everything else. But looking back on it, they were great times and very enjoyable. I had a great 3 years in Cavan. When I went down there, they were actually bottom of Division 3. But I just knew on the stadium they had there and everything else at the time, and the Kingspan, Breffni Park now as it is, but it just everything about Cavan football bad. And that occasion, I came back to Donegal in '92, Kieran, with the Sam Maguire, but it was nothing like when we went back with Anglo-Celtic to Cavan that night. I never witnessed anything like it in Cavan that night.
To set the scene then, so you did 3 years as Cavan manager, and after winning that Ulster title, you were done. It was an amazing way to bow out. So 92, you won your All-Ireland as a player with Donegal. Eventually, Brian McAniff is moving on. You're in the hunt for the Donegal job. You would have been interested in it. Were you a bit sore not to get it?
And listen, I put my name forward for the Donegal job in '94. That was the job I really wanted, because I felt there were still a lot in that Donegal team, and there were a lot of good young players coming through in Donegal and everything else. But look, I didn't get it at the time, and it put me in a bad situation. If I was going to keep playing with Donegal, if I didn't play well, people saying he didn't want to play well. And then, so I just felt that it was time, just in the Cavan. I got a phone call from the Cavan chairman at the time, Brendan Keeney, and I met him then in Cavan, and then that was it. The rest, as they say, is history after that. But I really enjoyed my 3 years. So
you would have been young then, taking that job in '94. What age?
Yeah, well, I was born in '61, so I was 33 when I took the job. Like Stephen King and maybe a couple of other players at that time were much younger than me, And but look, it was management. I'd been involved in managing my own club for 3 years, and I was involved in coaching my club and everything else. So it's well used to it. And I suppose we see it now, Joe. There are more of the people going into coaching that they're younger. It's a young man's game as such. At that time. So I always remember when I went down to it, and down and. Got involved in the whole thing, and I went round. I met the late great Eugene McGee, who had managed Cavan before that, and I met PG Carroll as well, who had managed just the years before that I took over there in Cavan. And I always remember a great story told about PG, and he's a very good friend of mine now, Donald Keoghan, who actually played for Cavan, and he always says that I dropped him because I didn't want big men, I wanted wee men in Cavan. That's what he keeps tells me this day. But at PG Carroll's managers on the sideline. I think it might have been a McKenna Cup game, and Donald was out playing in the field, and PG shouts out to Donald. He says, "Warm up, Donald, you're coming off." And that was, that was basically, where it was at. And I always remember another story. I was thinking about it today, actually. When I went down there, suppose what Cavan were at that stage. We were my first game in charge of the league match against Antrim, and we won that game by a point, I think, in Breffni Park. Then our next game was away to Wexford, down in Wexford. So we're having an overnight down in Wexford, going down, and next thing, a couple of the older players came to me and said that they wanted to take their wives with them down on the bus. And I says, there's no waves going down the bus allowed to go on the bus. But that seemed to be maybe the way it was in Cavan, that's, on some not maybe nights they might have a few pints and that before matches and everything else. They'd been beaten 7 years in a row in the Ulster Championship. So, and that's why it was very important that actually two of the men that's involved in the Cavan senior team now, Darren McCabe and Mickey Graham, came through. The young lads came through and they were winners. And that made the difference. And then the older players were good players and everything else, but they didn't have any belief in themselves. So we worked it over the couple of years and got a great belief. We got to the final of the under-21 in '96 against a very good Kerry team at the time.
Mm. And you were on the hit list with the Wives Club, I'd say, after that.
And you were looking after the underage setup as well. So you're a busy man. Like it's hard, it's not like Ulster football is by any means weak now, but I mean, in the 90s between Down, Donegal and Derry, it was insane. So like it was not easy for Cavan to make that breakthrough. So the biggest thing that changed then, did you say winners or runners coming through there, Martin?
Sorry. They became winners. They were winners. The young lads who came through, they didn't do that well at minor, but in '95 we got to an under-21 Ulster final, and we were beaten after a replay by Donegal. And them young lads, they knew they won, and it seeped through the whole thing to the other lads in, and they were great footballers, these other lads and everything else, but they just had this losing mentality in them, having lost Ulster for 7 years. They just didn't know. And lucky enough, maybe we got a reasonably good draw at home to Antrim in the Ulster Championship in '95, and we got over the line. And then what happened was that Donegal that year, who beat Down, who were our Ireland champions, and then a Monaghan team came down to Ballybofey and beat Donegal in Ballybofey, and then Cavan, just like they did this year, ended up we beat a very good Monaghan team and an Ulster semi-final.
What's your strongest memory of Ulster final day '97 then against Derry? And this is obviously a great Derry side with household names.
Yeah, well, it's funny. Before the match, I always remember Brian Mullins was managing Derry, and we always warmed up and Butler's Bridge, and that we came in from there. We just landed about 10 minutes before the match, and the first thing I remember was that my wife Patrice was sitting outside when the bus arrived. There was just 10 minutes to go, and I said, "This is great. Patrice is here to wish me well and everything else." And it was actually she had Ryan with her, and they wouldn't allow Ryan in with her into the ground. So I tried to get that sorted out. So that was the first thing that I tried to get sorted out when I arrived at the ground and then out in the field. But suppose when I look back at it, is the whole thing was that the bunch of players that we had, the effort and commitment that they put in. And I always remember 2 weeks before it, we went to Louth for a night away, just to get a night away to work on tactics and different things and everything else. And we had the table set up and all the lads sat around the table, and I just put a bottle of wine on every table for them and left the wine there and everything else, didn't say anything. And just people might be giving out about Cavan, people being tight and everything else, but not one of them opened the bottle of wine anyway. So I figured out at that stage that they were really, really well focused for what was ahead. But they ended up being a great bunch of players, but from their own point of view, they had a lot of pace about the team, a lot of pace about the team, which was great. But going back to what you said, is coming back into Butler's Bridge with the cup. As I said, I realised what it meant to Donegal to win, Sam, but I never witnessed anything like this coming back. The people, I mean, the amount of people that were crying and everything else coming back, and it was actually dangerous with the bus, trying to get the bus into Cavan Town. And I would say there were at least 15 to 20,000 people in Cavan Town. We landed back, and I came up with Joe, a very wrong decision after that. I said that was on the Sunday. So I said to try to keep the boys settled a bit on the Monday, that we'd actually meet and do a bit of a warm down and get together in Breffni Park on the Monday to stop them maybe drinking in the morning and all that. They were going to and I landed in Breffni Park on the Monday, and all the players came in, and there were about 5,000 supporters turned up in Breffni Park. So look at it was at that time, and this would have been as big, only just for the circumstances we're in at the minute for Cavan, because they're an unbelievable GAA county, Cavan.
Yes. Well, and then the semi-final, it was against Kerry, wasn't it?
Yeah, Kerry in the semi-final. Yeah.
And did you go into that thinking, look, this season's a success anyway, it doesn't really matter too much, or was that a disappointing day?
No, definitely not, because the year before we met Kerry, and as I said, in the under-21 final, and there were about 50,000 people at it, I think, in Thurles. And going down the home straight, there was about a minute to go, and I remember Pat Castley was refereeing it, from Westmeath was refereeing it, and ball went in between, I think was it Mick McCarthy, maybe Kieran, I don't know who's full back at that time for Kerry. Ball with Jason. Mick McCarthy and Jason Riley was full forward. Jason Riley was a butcher at that stage by trading his physical upper body was like the way the lads are now, the way this physical strength he had, his upper body was unreal. And he held off Mick McCarthy, turned, he was heading to goals, and the sides were level at the time. And Pat Carsey made a decision to blow up a free out against him. And I think that if we had, that call hadn't to go against us, we could have won that match. But there was a lot of players on both teams that day that met the following year again in the All-Ireland semi-final. No, we weren't. We were very confident, very hopeful. We got the whole thing settled down in Cavan and everything else. And I always remember myself and Paddy Rudden, the doctor, we just left Cavan the week before, and we timed ourselves on a stopwatch, leaving Cavan, drove up the whole way to Dublin, drove to the hotel we were going to meet in for the pre-match dinner, lunch, or whatever else we were having. We drove to that. Then we drove into Croke Park, and we timed the whole thing so we had it exactly the same for the day of the game and everything else. But I just felt that, and I think that's maybe the advantage they'll have this week, hopefully, Cavan. Just the whole pressure got to a lot of the younger lads, and I felt, and someone I always talk about since, that I lost them myself in the dressing room at that stage. The whole occasion just was too big. The massive crowd and everything else, and they never witnessed this and everything else. And especially in Kerry.
What do you mean you lost in the dressing room, Martin? What do you mean by that?
Yeah, I just think, Joe, I lost them in the sense of just that, you could see the nerves and everything else in them, and they were all their energy being soaked up with nerves. Understandable. Anybody will tell you, especially in a county like Cavan, that if you get, sometimes people say you have to get to a final and lose it before you won one and everything else. And just the way it was with them, especially young lads, the occasion was massive. And I know it myself. I played in an All-Ireland semi-final against Meath, and the game passed me by completely, and it just was over. And I was actually taken off the same day. And that can happen, players. It happens everywhere. And I just felt that day, I felt they didn't do themselves justice. Even at that, we hit the crossbar late on the first half, and we'd have put us a point ahead at that stage. And, we stayed at it and stayed in the game the whole time. But I just felt that we didn't do ourselves justice. And I just think there's something that, when I got involved in teams afterwards, you always try to, talk to players and work with players and everything else. Now, it's different now. There's so many such a big backroom team and everything else there now, and they can help it out. But it's understandable, But look, they were great times, though. There was a great occasion that in Brett. When you look back at Croke Park, the amount of Cavan people that were in Croke Park that day was unbelievable.
Insane. So that's an incredible 3 years to go in as a very young manager, to take a team that hadn't won an Ulster Championship game, never mind title, but a game since 1987, no title since 1969. You make the breakthrough, you give a reasonable account in the semi-final, and it's a great learning experience, and you sail off into the sunset then. So what was the rationale?
Yeah, well, I just, taking back to when I went down there first and I started training, it was like a good 2.5 hours from my own house to drive, and I was going down at least 3-4 times a week. And I remember we were playing Antrim in the first league game, I think, and I went down to watch Antrim and Wicklow playing some kind of a challenge game down in Wicklow. And, just the effort and commitment for the 3 years. The first year we got promotion from Division 3 to Division 2, and then the second year we went from Division 2 to Division 1. And, the whole thing. But, I was going down at least, I would go down probably, Joe, on a Monday night, go down to train on Monday night, come back up on a Monday, then go down on a Wednesday, then come back up on the Wednesday night, then head down on the Friday and stay down Friday night and Saturday night, maybe on Sunday, because I was managing the under-21 team as well. And you were doing that basically most of the year round, going down to watch club football and going around to watch other teams playing and everything else. At that time, you didn't have the backup and the stats that all the managers have now. You didn't have that. You'd go and watch the games yourself and study them and everything else. It wasn't there. So that command, I was just, I had it. It was burnt. Basically, I had myself burnt out, and I just hadn't got the energy to carry on. I would have loved to have kept going, but it was just too hard.
I was about to say that, Martin. It must have been tempting, because that seems like you're on the rise every year, and it must have been tempting to say, okay, All-Ireland semi-final, we didn't really perform, we still pushed Kerry, we still had it tight, I'll go back, I'll give it one more year and try and get them to a final. So it must have been a hard one to step away from.
Yeah, it wasn't, but I probably my mind made up I was going to do it, because it was my whole life. It became my whole life for the 3 years, really enjoyable and everything else. But I just had my mind made up that year that was going to be my last. I actually trained the team that year myself and done everything. Did everything myself with them that year. So I just felt, I had it. I was burnt out, and I was going to take a break for it. But look, they listen. They were there were a lot of very, very good footballers in it. Like it's all about confidence. Like the team, the same thing with this present bunch of players. We always knew they were good enough. They won 4 Ulsters under 21s, and you see now where they're at.
And Martin McHugh hasn't paid for a pint in Cavan since.
No, not a dinner, but I think after last Sunday, maybe I'll lose me dinners now. Mickey Graham's going to get all the free dinners and everything else. Everything else is going in Cavan. Yeah, but no, look, I have a lot of friends. Some of my best friends are from Cavan, and it was hard to face the music. I got a phone call on Sunday evening when there were a bit of celebrating going on. All I could hear was Championi, and I just had to take it all, but look at this. They're my second best favorite team anyway,
Good.
But I'd say there'll be a lot of excitement between now and Saturday evening all over. Cavan people all over the world,
And a very last one before we bring in Cora and Jason. So I make it you're then 37. You've taken this Cavan team from Division 3 to Division 1 and Ulster champions as well. That makes you very hot property. Did you have county chairman begging you on the phone to come down and manage them then for the next couple of years?
I probably had. I had that in my right. A lot of a different manager or different chairman that rang me get on to me and everything else. But I don't know. I got burnt out a lot. It's hard to believe it. When you go away from someone, maybe you keep at it and everything else. When you go away from it and all that, it's very, very hard to get by. That's why I think, even looking at people, what Sean Boylan did with me, Mick O'Dwyer with Kerry, or even, the Mickey Hart, to keep it going for that length of time, you have to give them a lot of credit and everything else. I found 3 years to keep, same voice in the dressing room and same everything else. It was very, very, very tough to do. But I thought of going back into managing everything else, but county manager. I don't know. I'm still maybe have one more go at it. I would love to have one more go at management, but it's a lot different now. Yeah. A lot different now than it was. I mean, it's game management and it's all this kind of stuff, shot selection and different stuff that wasn't in it in my time. If your corner forward was, if your corner forward was giving you bother, you switched to the other corner back across, and it was 1-to-1 at that situation. But it's completely different now, there's no doubt.
It sure is. Very happy to welcome Jason Sherlock back with us. And Cora Staunton is also here. We've had no Mayo representation this evening at all, so we decided we'd put that right. Cora, how you doing?
Not too bad now, Joe. Thanks for having me on.
No, appreciate it. We were talking to your new teammate, Breach Stack, a couple of weeks ago, so you've roped her down under as well.
I don't know if I've roped her down under. Yeah, she's joining. It'll be good to be playing with her rather than against her anyways for a year, that's for sure.
Yeah. When are you heading down, or are you down already?
No, we're heading down next Wednesday. So, couple of days' time. Just a bit tricky with COVID and flights and stuff. So, looking forward to going over about 14 days in hotel quarantine. Not really looking forward to that.
Oh dear, right, okay. Well, the sunshine on the other end of it will be nice. And then season kicks off, and is it going to be, relatively speaking, business as usual from a playing point of view over there then, hopefully?
Yeah, it seems to be borders over there, bar Western Australia, which is opening next week. They have all opened. So, yeah, it'll be relatively easy now. We'll be able to travel within Australia. As of next week, you can fly anywhere in Australia. So season starts in February. So, looking forward to getting back.
Great. Well, listen, best of luck with the season ahead. So we might start with these two finals then. We've been touching on Cavan, and it's the game on Saturday, so we'll go in chronological order. Jason, could you give us a detailed breakdown of where the hidden weaknesses are in this Dublin team and share them publicly with us, please?
No problem. How long have you got? Probably we don't have time for this segment, but obviously it's apparent that Dublin go into the game rightly as strong favourites, and I think in terms of what Dublin have done so far, I suppose that's right. I think, and I have no doubt, Dublin will be obviously respecting the opposition and respecting what Cavan can bring to the table. And I think a couple of foundations of Cavan's performance on Saturday, obviously the manager, he's been in a similar situation with Mullinocta and Kilmacud in terms of that David and Goliath and underdogs situation. I think one thing, and I'd refer to both games, what I'd be interested in and what I've picked up in the games this year, one is the emotion or lack of emotion in terms of a crowd and how that impacts teams. also, I think what's really important watching the 4 teams is, I suppose, the energy and their use of their energy. And if you're playing in my day it was a PlayStation game, but you can't keep your finger on that kind of full pace button all the time as a player. You have to use your energy at the right time. And I think that's something that Dublin have proven they can do. Mayo have proven they can do. Still to see it from a Cavan and Tipperary perspective, particularly the way they've played, and in reference to Cavan, they've played a high energy, high intensity game. It'll be very interesting to see whether they can do that in Croke Park on a Saturday night against obviously a team that will be comfortable on the ball as well. So it'll be just interesting to see how Cavan go about the game. I've no doubt they'll want to get a good start, and obviously they'll want to bring something different to the game that can challenge Dublin potentially in the Cavan's full forward line. So it'll be interesting to see how that plays out.
Watching even the Meath game the other night, it is a joy to watch the patterns of movement in the Dublin forward line. And we often hear that you've taken bits from basketball, and we know about your own background. What is the biggest thing that the sport of GAA, and I suppose Dublin in this case, have been able to take from basketball, Jason, if you had to pin it down to one big thing?
From basketball, well, I think that I suppose the court is a lot smaller. So although there's less players, I think there's a much bigger space. And again, Kieran would be very used to kind of a team on the same page, on the same wavelength, and coming up with a strategy to get a shot off and get a score. And I think that's something that is applicable to GAA, and like a number of teams kind of have their thoughts and ways of and methods on doing that. So I suppose Dublin are no different. The one thing that particularly when I came in and Donegal, they put up a blueprint of how to beat Dublin, and to the players' credit, they came up and they accepted that challenge, and they figured out ways to kind of counteract challenges. And I think this has been referred to, like, if a team sets up defensively now to a Dublin, they're quite comfortable with that, and they're quite comfortably not only offensively but defensively. And I think it's been referred to throughout this year, you do need to be able to kind of attack and transition. And to be fair to Cavan, they've done that really well in all the games so far. So as I said, it'll be interesting whether they can apply that game to challenge Dublin on Saturday.
Jo, just touching in on that, the kick-out strategy that Stephen has is obviously, he's got we've seen him pick out Conor Callaghan numerous times. We know what he can do. Something that Cavan have done pretty well against Patton and indeed Rory Biggin early on is kind of cut their losses and know when you're coming up against a keeper that has that array of kick-outs, they're doing probably a smart thing and then giving up the short ones. The only difference is, how do you think they'll fare out against what Dublin are, as you rightly say, are so used to playing against this footprint of Cavan giving up the short kick out, getting back, not getting sucker punched like Meath did with a Con catching a kick out and 1-2 with Fenton, and it's in the back of the net 5 seconds later. What will they do to try and break Cavan down? Because Cavan will probably sit back in that blanket. What's the key focus point for Dublin when they're faced with that?
Yeah, well, I think the kick out strategies and kick out part of the game now, for me, it's probably the most interesting part of the game nowadays. And you only have to look at the Ulster Championship there, and maybe it's conditions, but it does feel like there's a lot more longer kick outs this year. And again, with kick outs, and no better men than yourselves, you came up with strategies against Stephen a few years ago where you got a return, and no different than any other time. Stephen took that as a challenge, and we've obviously looked at, or the guys have looked at kind of ways and how we can counteract that challenge. You go back to the first game in the final last year where Jack McCaffrey got a goal that stemmed from a kick out. So it's such an important area of the game, and there is an element of risk and reward. Do you risk pushing up and getting the ball as a contest? But if you do that and you lose it, you could be in trouble. And Donegal have been great exponents of maximising that situation in the past. Or do you accept and you concede the kick out? Now that brings challenges because straight away you're given an opposition a platform. So it'll be interesting to see what they do there. And from both sets of teams, no doubt they'll have focused a big part of the preparation in the last week or so in relation to the kick out situation.
Well, Eamon Donoghue in the Irish Times did great work on all this, and he looked at the 4 provincial finals, and 60% of the kick outs went long, which is a big jump in what it would have been in the last couple of years. And so he said Cavan against Donegal, they went long 14 times with their kickouts. Now, they only won 7 of them, but off those 7, they scored 1-2. So that's the payoff if you can win that ball further up the pitch. Cora, look, everybody is looking at this game and nobody's given Cavan even a hint of a chance. I mean, it's just tricky. Like, even the Cavan players, it'll be a fight to get them to believe they can beat Dublin. I don't know what you do when you're that much of an underdog against a team like Dublin.
Yeah, it's going to be very difficult for them. Obviously coming off the hype of the Ulster final win, the momentum they have taken, from all their games in Ulster, you'd hope they bring it through to an All-Ireland semi-final, and normally you would. But when you're coming up against the juggernaut that is the Dubs, and you've watched them right throughout Leinster just destroy teams, it's going to be extremely hard for them. Dublin at this stage are so well oiled. Everyone knows what they're doing. Everyone knows what, when one player gets on the ball, the other 4 or 13 outfield players know exactly what to do. And yeah, it's just looking like they're going to be very hard to stop. And I just think, out of any team, Dublin, whether it's crowds, no crowds, none of them things are going to affect them. So yeah, Cavan will always have hope, and it's the year that anything could happen. But I just can't see anything but a Dublin victory. Yeah,
and like there's so much competition for places in the Dublin side. It's not like when they have the game won and they're 7 or 8 points up, they take the foot off the pedal. Like, they're destroying teams and they just keep going and stick to the process. Like, Cora, you don't want to be almost defeatist about it, but like in the back of their minds, do any of the, like, if you're part of that Cavan management group and they're sitting around the table over a coffee, does anyone say, like, do we want to go for damage limitation here and keep the thing a bit respectable? Or is that just such a defeatist attitude that nobody dare say that?
Yeah, no, I couldn't imagine that most players couldn't go out to a game with that attitude. I suppose for Cavan going out, they're going to have to take the game, and the way it is with the water break now in quarters, and reassess after each quarter, and whether hold Dublin or even try and win a quarter and then reassess after each. If you can go in at half time, not too far afield or even level, they'll see that as a win. So it's the small wins along the way that they'll be looking for. But certainly, Cavan will go out full of confidence, after winning the Ulster final. But as I said, it's Dublin, and it's going to be very, very difficult.
Martin, for you, what's a good day for Cavan, being realistic? What's a good day for Cavan on Saturday?
Well, it was just, Joe, looking at stats there. These two teams met in an under-21 semi-final, and I think it finished 11 points to 10. And, Dublin had Fenton, Small, Scully, Costello, Mannion, them type of players playing that day. Cavan had about 5 or 6 of their players. So I think it was 2014 semi-final, and Cavan weren't happy. There were a big refereeing call at the end of the game, but I think there was just a point in it. So we look at the league game last year, what was 6 points in it in Breffni Park between the two teams. So Cavan, they'll have that belief, the belief in themselves and everything else. But it's an unbelievable stat that I got about Cavan. In the Ulster Championship, in the first half, they've conceded, this is leaving the extra time out of it against Monaghan, right? 235. And in the second half, they've conceded 12 points.
Right.
So that's an unbelievable stat. I didn't know. Just somebody said to me the day, and I just checked it up, and that's it. So they're going to have to. They're a great second half team. There's no doubt about it. Only conceded. I mean, you take it. They played 2 Division 1 teams in Donegal and Monaghan, and they conceded 3 points I have here against Donegal, 4 against Down, 3 against Antrim, and 2 against Monaghan in the second half. So they're a really good second half team. But I think as Jason said earlier on there, they wouldn't want to give Dublin that bigger run on them and everything else to start. So there's no pressure on them in that there. And we look at it as most people. I was in Cavan working during the week, and they're saying that all the pressure's in Dublin. This Dublin team are a wee bit like 2014. They haven't been tested at all, and they were supposed to be, nobody was going to beat them in 2014, and they were beaten. So look at people say it's different. It's a new manager and everything else, the point of view. And I suppose the big thing from Dublin is the work rate that they have in their team. And, when you look at Brian Howard and Paul Mannion, who are first 2 men you pick on a team sheet, and they're not making the team, maybe they didn't come back in good enough shape as far as Desi was concerned after lockdown and everything else. And he's Schanberger in there and Paddy Small, who are working their socks off to keep their place in the team. So I think there'll be no complacency and everything else. And I really say, and I want to say it here now, that I think, I know there's a lot of talk about who's the greatest footballer in the country and everything else. I think Conor Callans will be the greatest footballer that we've ever seen in this country. I really believe he's that good.
Martin, that's a very good point. And Gio, just that switch, and I know you played Kilkenny at stages in the final last year, intermittently at full forward, but it seems like a real kind of signal of intent from Dessie Farrell to play Con further out and Kieran inside. It's working really well. What do you make of it being a kind of a full-time switch?
I think obviously you have two great players. I don't think you could go wrong with Kieran or Con playing 11 or 14. And what I like about them, and they will do what they need for the team. And some days Kieran will be needed around 11, and other days it'll be Con. And they're quite fluid and they're quite selfless to do whatever is required for the team. And that's a great way to be. And there's a level of comfort there and confidence that they can, and they're empowered to make those decisions and make those calls themselves. So absolutely, yeah. And I think it was referred to by someone there you were talking to previously about, like, particularly with matchups nowadays, that you spend a lot of time matching up guys, and if they don't play in the position that you expect them to play, that can obviously throw a team off and stuff like that. So it is nice to be able to be fluid enough to switch positions if required.
What do you think, by the way, Kieran? Like, it's one thing stopping Donegal at the Athletic Grounds and another thing doing it at Croke Park against Dublin.
Yeah, look, I think Croke Park is a factor, and Martin has documented how good they've been in the second half defensively. It is great, but when you get to the vast spaces of Croke Park and you start seeing these athletes up close, you know, and you've preconceived ideas, and then Cora's right, like, there should be no player taking the pitch for Cavan tomorrow that shouldn't believe that they can win the game. You know, we're optimists at heart, footballers. We don't get to this level without, you pessimists don't get to this level.
No, and they wouldn't have won Ulster with a bad attitude.
Correct. So they're going to go for it, and they're going to think, look, we'll do this and we'll do that. And when you're out there after 15 minutes and these guys in Fenton burst past you, and you know you're not going to catch him, and he's a different machine than you thought, and you haven't come up against him in Croke Park, and Martin said that it was 6 points in Breffni, and that's fine. And I think they missed a bit of a trick by maybe not trying to get it out, because it would give them a better chance of winning an All-Ireland semi-final at the end of the day. In Croke Park, it's just the Dubs. I've played in Killarney. You should have lost to Killarney numerous times to Cork, and we always found a way to get back. The crowd would help us get over the line. You know, our kicking accuracy would be better than it was in Páirc Uí Chaoimh, and we never lost those games to Cork in the last 23 or 4 years. But we've lost plenty of blow in Páirc Uí Chaoimh.
Right.
You know, James Masters will be hooking them over from the sideline. So there's a comfort level of kicking in places. These Cavan boys won't have played too much in Croke Park. The Dubs are deadly accurate up there, so that it is a big factor. It's nobody's, as we said earlier on, it's nobody's fault, but it is a huge bearing on where this game is going to be won and lost. Just Dublin and Croke Park, they just know it so well.
Yeah.
They're so accurate, and their power and their speed, the gap becomes even bigger because they have more space to show that off. So that's a huge bearing in the game.
It's funny, when Martin was about to say that Con could be the best footballer we've ever seen, I thought for a second you were going to say Brian Fenton, which goes to the heart of just how how sensational they are. One last point before we leave this game and get your thoughts on Mayo Tip. Jason, so often Dublin have to go into games as favourites, you know, and it's a really underestimated quality that they have, that never seems to really affect their performance in any great way. You know, being favourites every time is can be a trap. Is that something that you talk about at the start of the year, or regularly dealing with the favourites tag, or not really discussed?
It wasn't really discussed. There wasn't really a factor in the sense of, like, and again, it's a new regime, so I don't know what's going on now, but we valued them. We wanted to perform, and we had ideas of what a good performance looked like, and that's what the guys went after all the time. And a bit like Cora said, you do that from play to quarter to half, and you're just focused on that and that outcome. And again, I suppose it would have been nice to get that great performance. In my 5 years, we didn't get it. I'd like to think that the guys will get it at some stage, and that's based on I suppose the challenge those guys and the parameters those guys have set for themselves. So no, that won't factor them. I actually, in terms of favourites, I actually bumped into Hugh Hurricane this morning, a great Gael and a great Cavan, and I suppose there's an element of sympathy for the likes of you coming up to this game, having the Boar's Head in town, and what the crowd would be like if it was around. But at the same time, that could help Cavan. We've played Cavan a couple of times behind closed doors over the last couple of years, and they will bring an intensity and a passion that, one, they're battle hardened from an Ulster Championship, and obviously this is going to mean so much to them. So that will bring them a long way. So it will be interesting to see how long, if they can get a good start in the game. As Martin said, they haven't started well in first half. Like, I turned the game off against Down because there was another game on and I thought they were beaten, and it was full credit that they were back in the game. So they won't be able to do that against a Dublin team. So it'll be good to see whether they can start on the front foot and see how far it takes them.
Okay. So as for Sunday then, Mayo against Tipperary. Cora, Mayo potentially ahead of schedule in an All-Ireland final this year. You know, we thought this was something of a transition phase. How do you like the look of this new-ish side?
Yeah, newish. I suppose that's a bit of a debate here. Is it an inexperienced or an experienced side? And I think I seen something during the week. You know, while there's of the team that starts in the Connacht final, there's 5 guys that have 6 or less championship games, but the other 9, some of them have played 50, 60 games. So, we have a kind of a good balance of youth and experience. But a lot of that team have been around, for the last, decade. I think, this is our 9th semi-final in 10 years, which, for Mayo is unbelievable. And, obviously they haven't reached the Holy Grail. But things are quite subdued in Mayo. And I suppose COVID and the way things have happened, I think the crowds and the Mayo crowd obviously not being there, I think in some ways it's been spoken in the media here that it's actually helped Mayo and probably took a little bit of pressure off the team.
James Horan has said as much, actually, interestingly, because he talked about sensing the anxiety in the crowd back in the 2013 final, and then just this week he was saying he feels in the current games there isn't as much emotion swirling around, is what he said. Sometimes that can add to anxiety a little bit. So I think he said it's a more consistent performance area, was the phrase he used about the current situation. But yeah, he felt maybe it's not the worst thing in the world for Mayo at the moment.
Yeah, I do think so. I think especially for a team that has fallen short on many occasions, and obviously the crowd that Mayo draw to any match, whether it's a league match or an All-Ireland semi-final, is massive. And I do think the guys feel pressure. The longer you are, obviously, without winning an All-Ireland, the pressure ramps. Obviously that's probably not there for the younger players. But I think when you're playing a game and, you're an Oisin Mullen or an Owen McLaughlin and you may make a mistake and the crowd is on your back, I think for them it's very difficult. So, we've seen how the younger guys in the team, especially Oisin Mullen, McLaughlin, as I mentioned, Tommy Conroy, even Matthew Ruan, how they flourished without that pressure. So, yeah, it'll be interesting to see against Tip how they'll go, in Croke Park. But yeah, I think Mayo are battle hardened, and they really see that this is a year that they could reach the Holy Grail.
It's funny. Last week, Liam Cahill, the Waterford manager, said he felt that the Waterford players benefited in that first half from no crowd because they didn't hear the groans and the sense of, oh God, we're being pummeled here by Kilkenny again. Peter Cavan, Martin, was talking up Mayo and he tips them to beat Tipperary. And one of the points he made was, if you take the Galway match in the league and in the championship, he was saying Galway in the league, Galway left space in front of the likes of Aidan O'Shea and Cillian O'Connor and Tommy Conroy, and those lads did the damage that day. So then come championship time, when Galway put numbers back to stop that happening again, they have the likes of Owen McLaughlin and Paddy Durkin and even, say, Lee Keegan and Croker to kill them with the running game. So he was saying Mayo can hurt you different ways.
Yeah, I just want to go back to the point that Kieran made about Cavan maybe missing the trick, if you don't mind, Joe. Sure. I just think that we took the Ulster final, we play Monaghan and it's Monaghan and it was Clonus, and that's their home venue and there's no problem with it. And if Kerry were playing Dublin and Croke Park now in semi-final, there'd be no problem. If Mayo were playing, there's no problem. I think it's a wee bit unfair that why shouldn't Cavan play in Croke Park? It's not that they want to play, that's where the All-Ireland semi-finals are played, as Croke Park. And I think that, if Tipperary beat Mayo and get the final, well, we look to get the All-Ireland final out of Croke Park. And I just think that we should just leave it as it is. People, I know it was maybe ex-Cavan players that started saying it should be taken out of Croke Park and everything else. I mean, that's where you play your All-Ireland semi-finals. Played with Dublin, been played there this last 100 years in Croke Park. And I think if Kerry were playing them, Kieran, they'd be happy enough to go to Croke Park to play them.
Well, no, Martin, we wouldn't. I'd be trying to get it on in Semple Stadium where we played J.O. and the gang. I know the only reason we say it is because there's no crowds. The reason it's on, and historically on in Croke Park, is because it's All-Ireland semi-final, you 60, 70,000 that has to be on there. And that was the only reason I think it was maybe muted originally. But I just think, personally, I think they would have had a better chance of beating them. Yeah, it's great to play there and it's a great occasion. And I will be cheering them on, of course. But I just think, even if you look at the athletics grounds the last day, if you look at even your own Donegal team, and I don't know what Ryan thought, but Donegal, not overly used to the athletic grounds. They missed 4 or 5 kicks, if you remember, late on in the game, all curled wide on the same side. It looked like it was more... If that had been on in a place they were more familiar with, they may not have missed that same amount on the same side. I just thought it was a bearing on the tightness of the pitch as well. But look, absolutely 100%, if that's your opinion, I just felt that they might have had a better chance of making this more uncomfortable for Dublin in a tighter pitch. It's an we're used to it in Kerry every time we go and play a league game in some place. When we had our dynamic running and big forward line, we'd often see sidelines, old paint further out and brand new paint about 3 or 4 meters in, so it does make it harder to score, obviously. So that was only the reason I was saying it more so.
This is your anti-Dublin bias coming through again, Donaghy. That's all this is. Yeah. Jason, you must get sick of this crap. Like, I've been trying to find ways to beat the Dubs. It's terrible.
We'd love to go back down to Semple Stadium. We had great crack down there, apart from the result, but we had great crack.
I think. Sorry, Martin. If I came on there, sorry. I think that we are creating a monster here. I know maybe Jason might agree with the way it is and everything else. With when we hear stuff we've been said about clubs, I think there's 5 provinces now in the country. You know, we have the 4 in Dublin is the other one, and I think the GA are basically treating them like that there. But I think what I think myself personally, people talk about splitting Dublin into 2. I think my own son Mark, he said he must have looked at the 2 teams and he said both of them would probably won the All Ireland. They end up meeting in the All Ireland final anyway. But I think what definitely should happen in the G should be 4 minor teams in Dublin, because I'm going to look at it a wee bit different. People saying they're one. It's not the fact they're not one in minors. The Meath team hammered them this year in the minor, so I don't think that should happen. So I think from a GA point of view, is we have to give every child a chance to play at a level. And I mean, these big populated areas now where to start the way back on the small club and everything else, but now it's completely changed. But I think it's something we've got to look at in the GA, the big populated areas, and even the likes of Dublin. I think there should be 4 minor teams coming out of Dublin to make it more competitive, to be good for the GA and to be better. And when we look at it down the road, if they want to have 2 senior teams, that's fair enough. But I think definitely all over the country, the big popular areas have to be looked at, and you know, amount of more clubs are going into it, because that's the one thing, you know, it has completely changed what the GA was about, just about on the small club. It has now changed. It's about the big club now, because most of the population has moved to the big cities and the big towns.
We'll pick up that point again at some stage. Can I drag you back onto topic at hand, or we'll be here all night? So Mayo, I was talking about Mayo. They've got the running game. They've got great dangerous forwards inside as well. So how do you see this game on Sunday, Martin?
I think the big one is we look at the 2 big players in Tipperary, you know, Conor Sweeney and Michael Cunningham. Mayo will deal with them a lot better than Cork did. I think Cork put maybe 2 of their under 20 players on them, and you know, they were, especially in the first half, they didn't deal with them at all. And I think Mayo will deal a lot better. You're probably looking at Lee Keegan and Paddy Durkin picking them up, and you know, it's going to be a lot tougher on them. And we look at Mayo. So most of the big talking point about Mayo at the minute, and you have to give a lot of credit to James Horan, the way he's rebuilt the team in a year, and he's it's great. And I mean, what they've achieved already has been great for Mayo. I think everything after this is a bonus, and everything else what they do. But maybe in Mayo they look at it differently in that there. But I think the big one is Aidan O'Shea factor. Is he better, you know, to leave him inside at full forward? Because people say when he's out the field, everything has to go through him, and he holds up the ball. Where there are a lot more pace coming into their team, particularly the half back line, they're pushing forward in there, and he's more effective inside and everything else. Can they afford to leave him in there? And I think that's the big one. You know, it gives them another option. Killian O'Connor going well. I heard Andy Moore saying earlier on today that when Killian O'Connor plays well, Mayo plays well. But the one question I would ask, and it's a funny one, and I don't expect Cora to answer this, but would any of the Mayo forward line make the Dublin team? So that's why I say make the Dublin forward line. I think that's why it's a great credit to Mayo already, what they've achieved and what they've achieved in the past, because I think they've been an unlucky team that came up against the greatest team that we've ever seen playing Gaelic football.
I can see Cora's eyes darting around there. She's trying to do the maths of where we can squeeze in Killian O'Connor.
And Diarmuid O'Connor.
I'd have to put them in their fellow clubmen. So yeah, for sure. I'd probably disagree with Martin a little bit. I don't think Mayo are rebuilding. I think people look at it. Yeah, we have a few new players in, but the majority of that team have been around for a long time, and maybe we just haven't seen a lot of them. I was even surprised when I seen, you know, how many championship games the likes of Conor Loftus has played. I think he's played his 23rd championship game, so he's been around quite a while. So yeah, we've added youth to it. Yeah, people look that we should have had it. It's a transition phase, but I actually think the guts of this Mayo team have been around for a lot of time, and they're very experienced. So I think the next couple of years for this team is really important, and people have probably been writing them off for the last 4 or 5 years that they're done, and it's credit to James Horn what he's done and kept the momentum of this team going. And I just think no one everyone wants Mayo to win in All Ireland, but like for the players that have been involved, I do think they're in as good as a shout as any team to win in All Ireland this year.
Jason, who's going to win on Sunday?
I think from Tipperary's perspective, it's obviously a historic win to win the provincial title, and it's their challenge is how they can reset after that, because obviously that was a big ambition of theirs. I'm still drawn to how close they were to being beaten by Limerick in the game beforehand. So in terms of form line, they played really well against Cork to get the win and had a well-deserved win. But I suppose I would be worried whether they would be at the level that Mayo might be. Also, going back to what I mentioned about the transfer of energy, I think Declan Brown mentioned about playing on the front foot. You can't play 70 minutes on the front foot. And my observation of that Tipperary team is that particularly that half back line, they're very strong going forward, but it does leave gaps at the back, and it does leave them fatigued when they need to defend. And I would be worried that they might concede goals against Mayo on Sunday. I think the couple of observations I would have had of Mayo this year, I heard James Horn say before one of the games, I think it was the Roscommon game, we picked a team with a lot of power. And I think that's been a very focused kind of thought process, particularly in winter conditions, particularly thinking of where they need to go to have ultimate success. And they certainly have a lot of athletes there. And having O'Shea closer to the goal, it means that they do have that option to kick the ball in as well with the mark. So it'll be interesting to see how that plays out. The second element that I've been really interested in, and I was a big fan of his as a player, is Kieran MacDonald and his impact and imprints in that management team. I think subtly, he's made a big difference to what's going on there. Even the sea change of seeing Aidan O'Shea as a full forward, the type of players that they're playing in the game as well. And I just see a lot of fingerprints of Kieran MacDonald all over that Mayo team. And I would agree with Cora. I don't see them as rebuilding. I think they're at a team that are potentially ready to strike. And having no crowd, I referred to this before the championship started, I just felt sometimes in the past Mayo have been fueled by the crowd both positively and negatively, and just removing that potentially could give them a great chance to have the ultimate success this year.
So again, sorry, I keep forcing you to kind of betray the loyalty you have to the Dublin dressing room a little bit, but say last year, that awesome few minutes after half-time where you put that game against Mayo to bed. When you were planning for Mayo, what areas would you target? Where are the weaknesses?
They match up very well to Dublin, and I think Martin refers to them as unlucky. I think this Mayo team will go down, whether they win an All-Ireland or not, as one of the greatest teams to play the game. I don't think it should be judged on whether they win an All-Ireland or not, because of how competitive they've been against a team that have done so well over the last few years. And all of the games between Dublin and Mayo in my time have been very competitive and very close. I think last year, obviously, Dublin, we were down at half time. That obviously was a focus for the players, but I think the kick-out situation was a challenge for Mayo. We know in terms of personnel-wise that Mayo have fluctuated from keeper to keeper, and that is a challenge. And we spoke about it already, about how important it is to get your possession. And again, Mayo seem to be kicking the ball a bit longer this year, so maybe that will be their tactic on Sunday, and if they get through that later on in the year. But definitely that is a challenge. But as a team, physically and from a strength and conditioning point of view, they are second to none. I only have to go back to the year. I think they played 10 matches to get to an All-Ireland final. We thought they might be fatigued. It was the opposite. They had the strength and condition advantage over a Dublin team at the time. So that's full credit to them. So again, I do think they're very well placed to be competitive.
Okay, very interesting. On the kick-out point, I mean, Cora, if Mayo are struggling to ping them 30, 40 yards to pick out men, they're as well off hitting them long a bit more often, and sure, like, there's a 50-50 chance you might pick up some ball there and then you're on the front foot straight away.
Yeah, I think that's what they've gone. Reading the stats in actually one of the papers, the Mayo News, they're 50%. They've won 50% of the long kickouts that they have taken in 3 championship matches this year. So, yeah, I think you'd seen and Martin, the debate about Aidan O'Shea whether he should play full forward or play midfield. And I know James Horn has spoken about it on occasion that it's against the opposition and its needs. Sometimes they'll play him. They've decided that they'll play him for a longer spell, maybe at full forward. It won't be in and out. It might be a 10 or 15 minute spell at full forward, and if he's doing well there. But, needs must against Galway. He was brought out around the middle when they needed to win possession. So, it's a great attribute to have. I suppose the thing in Mayo that people are probably a little bit worried about is, our midfield. We're quite inexperienced and probably not the most physical power there with Matthew Ruan and Conor Loftus. They're more athletes. Matthew Ruan obviously be bigger and stronger, Conor being more of a runner. But I think, as Jason said, we've a huge amount of pace and power around that middle 8. Adding in Owen McLaughlin, obviously, Stephen Cohen, Lee Keegan has been playing corner, playing wing. Paddy Durkin is having a great year. And then you add in the likes of Kevin McLaughlin. So they're in the half forward line. So there is a huge amount of pace and power. But I suppose midfield is an area that's a little bit of a concern for us. And, obviously Tipperary are very strong there with Colin O'Riordan, Liam Casey and Stephen O'Brien. So that'll be interesting to see how that'll go on Sunday.
Okay, so Martin, it sounds like in this strangest of years, we're still headed for a Mayo Dublin final once again. If I can get ahead of myself, how would you see that?
Well, look, I think it's the only team that will beat Dublin is Dublin themselves, and it's hard to see that happening when you even listen to J.O. here now, who was involved with them in the past. I think they got that big wake-up call in 2014 and they work everything out and they've everything worked out, even the amount of players they have in the field and everything else. I can't see Dublin being beaten, but I think going back just a wee bit to the middle of the field and we look at, suppose, where Dublin can be got at is maybe where Donegal were got at as well, with the same type of goalkeeper, maybe not that big and maybe not that comfortable on a high ball going in. And I think if teams can run enough ball out the field to put that pressure on them, to see how they cope with that there. And I think the other thing we talk about midfield being weak, maybe the Mayo midfield, where you can do with what Conor Callan's doing for Dublin all the time, coming to the half-forward line. If you have a goalkeeper that's able to pin the kick out and hit them with that there, Donegal did it with Michael Murphy. It's a thing that probably Mayo will work on with Aidan O'Shea to take him out there, because it could be the likes of, Davy Byrne would follow him out from the full back line. They seem to be, that's the player they could send with Thomas Galligan if he comes out there on Saturday evening. So I think that there is an area you can get at them. I think they haven't been tested because they're that good out the field and everything else. But if a team could just start testing them with high ball on top of their full back line, it'd just be interesting to see how they cope. Because it seems that Stephen Cluxon likes to do what Sean Patton likes to do in Donegal, is fist the ball when it goes in high.
Okay. So give us a prediction then, Kieran. Who are you going for? What kind of margins are we talking in both games?
I'm thinking Dublin by between 10 and 12. And I think Mayo by 3 or 4. I think it'll be tight. I think Cora's right. I think the midfield, I think breaking ball is actually going to be a huge factor, because there's so many big men out there. Who's hungrier, who's under it better, who's more up for it in that instance. Because possession's everything, but both teams are going long. I think 70% in the Connacht final was long and 66 in the Munster final. So there's going to be a pile of ball put out there, and whoever wants it will give the platform to their forwards, and both teams have very good forwards, and Mikey Quinlivan and Sweeney, obviously Aidan O'Shea, Killian and Tommy Conroy. So they both have very dangerous players, and I think if Mayo's bench might be just the factor that gets them over the line.
Okay. Martin?
Yeah, I think it'll be a Mayo Dublin final. I think Mayo will win well enough, actually. I think they'll win by maybe 5-6 points at least against Tipperary. And from Dublin's point of view, you look at it, I hope from a Cavan point of view that they can keep it under 10 points at least. But, I said it was in Cavan and there's a lot of belief, and they're not afraid of playing Dublin and everything else. But look at, that's what I feel. I think it probably, I just think if we look at it, Joe, from a point of view, is that, did you ever think you'd see a time, Michael, I'm a lot older than you see here, that a team would be 1-100 on an All-Ireland semi-final in Gaelic?
I know. So you're going Dublin and Mayo, and we're splitting Dublin when? By 2030 or?
As quickly as possible.
That's great. Okay. Jason, how do you see it? Same?
I think Dublin, Cavan, I think Dublin they won't care about what the bookies said. The bookies had Donegal as big outsiders in 2014, and it'll be no different on Saturday. They'll respect the challenge, they'll respect the opposition, and they'll go out to perform. I'll be just interested to see what Cavan do. They'll come with a plan. How long they'll have that plan and how well it'll work, who knows? But that'll be the challenge. I'd like to think that regardless of what that challenge is, Dublin will figure out a way to perform and win the game. I think then going on to Sunday, I think Tipperary have some great forwards. I think we all love watching the likes of Quinlivan playing, Sweeney playing, and O'Riordan is such a loss to Gaelic football when you see him perform the way he did in the Munster final. They have scorers, absolutely. I just would be worried about the other end of the pitch, and they potentially, I feel they might be vulnerable to goals. I think if they can stop Mayo scoring goals, I think they could be competitive. But I think if Mayo do get a couple of goals, they could win it comfortably enough.
Okay, very interesting. Cora, I suspect you're not going to break with tradition here.
No, yeah, it's very hard to. I do think Dublin will win well. I think they'll overrun Cavan. It'll be all how long Cavan can hold them for. Dublin bench is phenomenal. You look at Cormac Costello coming on and scoring 7 points the last day, and Brian Howard, another Ulster on, Paul Mangan. I just think they'll be overrun, and it'll be, if they keep it under 10 points, they'll be doing well. And I think Mayo will. Yeah, I think they'll be looking to win well. I think it'll be at least six plus points. I'm with Jason. I think Mayo will have a lot of firepower up front, and I do think obviously Tipperary with Quinlivan and Sweeney have some very good forwards. But when you have the likes of Lee Keegan and probably Patrick Durkin or Chris Barrett maybe on them, it's going to be difficult to get scores. So yeah, I do think Mayo will win well.
Okay, guys. Listen, brilliant analysis. Thanks so much, Cora Staunton, Jason Sherlock, and Martin McHugh for being with us this evening. Much appreciated, guys. Enjoyed the games at the weekend.
Thanks, Joe.
Cheers. Thanks to Kieran Donaghy.
Thanks, Joe.
Great to have you up here in Dublin in the big smoke for a change. That was the latest in our series of GAA Roadshows in association with Supervalu, calling on GAA fans across the country to support where you're from. You can check out youtube.com/Supervalu Ireland, and check out as well otbsports.com. There's a Bernard Brogan podcast in association with Supervalu. The latest this week was with Shane Lowry, so that is well worth checking out. We'll see you again in advance of the final. Thanks very much.